Hi. My name's John Burchett, and I run our state and local public policy operation here at Google. And I just want to welcome you all here to our Google DC offices, and say how excited we are to have the Aspen Institute and the Urban Innovation Center launch here in DC. Urban innovation's an issue that's really dear to my heart. In my previous career, I spent 10 years doing economic development in the city of Detroit. And as somebody once said to me recently when I told them that, they said, "Wow, you weren't very good at that, were you?" But that's really where my passion lies in life. So it's very exciting to be here. It's exciting to have Mayor Bowser here and Walter Isaacson and all of you. We're thrilled to have you here at Google. So welcome, enjoy this important launch, and I'll turn it over to Jennifer, who will get us going.
Thanks to John and Amber and Jenny and Steph and another John and Colin, the amazing team at Google for hosting us today. I'm Jennifer Bradley, and I'm the director of the Center for Urban Innovation at the Aspen Institute. I'm really glad you could join us today for our inaugural event to talk about what urban innovation really is, how it's playing out in Washington, D.C. and across the nation, and how each of us can advance its spread. I'll say more about the Aspen Institute and welcome some of our distinguished guests and describe the mission of the Center for Urban Innovation a little bit later. Right now, because Mayor Bowser's time with us is very short, I'd like to introduce her and Walter Isaacson. Mayor Muriel Bowser is the 7th elected and 2nd woman mayor of the District of Columbia. Before her election in November 2014, she was selected 3 times as a council member for Ward 4. You can read more about her legislative and public achievements in the materials that are on your chairs. Over the last month, the mayor has announced several initiatives designed to secure DC's status as an innovation hub and to make sure that innovation's promise reaches people in every neighborhood, every community, and every ward of our city. Walter Isaacson is the president and CEO of the Aspen Institute and the author of several best-selling books, most recently, The Innovators: How a Group of Hackers, Geniuses, and Geeks Created the Digital Revolution. A glance at his bio in your packet will tell you that his list of professional accomplishments and public service commitments is very long. But you're not here to listen to me talk about them. You're here to listen to them. So please welcome Walter Isaacson and Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Thrilled by this, especially to have Jennifer kicking off this program for the Aspen Institute, because to me it's one of the key things we could be doing now. I was telling the mayor that in New Orleans after the storm 9.5 years ago, it was the innovators who came in and tied innovation to the community that made it work. You know, we all thought in the digital age that people could work wherever they wanted and sort of phone or Skype it in. It happens that when you're an innovator, you want to be around others. You want to be in creative places. That's what this beautiful space here is all about. Eric Lavin, standing in the back there, is doing a social entrepreneur and business entrepreneur innovation lab at the Aspen Institute for young entrepreneurs. People want to be together. That's and right. So I wanted to start by asking you about your vision, which you've been explaining for the past month, of tying innovation to the needs of communities, neighborhoods, and real people.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I want to thank the Aspen Institute for your real commitment, because I think you share our values about how we connect tech and innovation to the real problems and challenges and opportunities in cities. And so that's exactly what we see tech and innovation able to do for us in DC. I ran on a promise, and I'm running a government that's built around spreading opportunities all across the city, across all of the district's 8 wards. And we know that technology and innovation can do that for us. So we had a fun program, and it turns out that my staff really ran me all over the city all month, celebrating innovation and during the month of May. And we built our innovation strategies around connecting technologists to the underserved communities in DC. We have, like other cities, significant gaps in educational achievement, in access to jobs and economic development and health outcomes. And we're really focused on how we close those gaps. So just a couple of examples of what we did during the month. We launched a partnership with Howard University that happens to be on our digital corridor along the 7th Street and Georgia Avenue corridor. We announced that we would focus on girls and attracting girls to tech, and we happen to be the city that's best for female technologists in the United States. Best.
How'd that happen?
You know, the girls are running this city now, Walter, and so we want to make sure that we're attracting women in tech.
We had it for one.
Yeah. So we are also building on a lot of leading in a lot of ways. We have a pretty robust DC net and a connection that allows us to connect 250 community organizations to high-speed internet at a lower cost. We also have 75% of our schools connected to high-speed internet. So we're building on all of those things during Innovation. And a real fun thing that we announced during Innovation was having free Wi-Fi at all of our parks and recreation centers. So you can see by doing that and by focusing on our students and by focusing on partnerships with 1776, for example, to really locate our high potential students and get them connected to tech in our underserved areas.
You know, to build on that, one of the great questions about technology and innovation is whether it will shrink or widen the inequality gap that we have. How do you see it?
Well, I think that we have to be more intentional about focusing resources. And one thing that I've noticed is that the market and the technologists are going to find ways to connect tech to profitable endeavors. And part of the role of government is to connect tech solutions where profit might not lead people. And I challenged everybody that came to work for me that we're going to focus on solutions that help us in the human services, for example. We launched a very significant effort for the first time in the District of Columbia to commit to ending homelessness in our nation's capital. And it is a robust program. It's going to take a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of solutions that we haven't thought of before. I had a simple question for everybody who wanted to help me manage the city, and that was, how do we stop having people wait in line for basic benefits? Outside, long lines, cold, rain, you name it. If we can figure out how to make it easier to get a ride in our city using technology or park in our city using technology, we can figure out how to connect people to food stamp programs and TANF programs, but more importantly, job training programs that will help them get on the pathway to the middle class.
What about your coding camps and things like that? Because one of the problems of the inequality is kids from Northwest can always learn how to code. You grew up in Northeast.
I did. And I can't code.
Well, you know, we have a class right outside.
I did once.
You can learn anything.
I can learn anything, and you know, gratefully, I was raised with that expectation that I could learn anything. But what you raise is how we use our school system, and our Deputy Mayor for Education is here, and I know she's been very active with Aspen. Jenny Niles is here.
Thanks, good to see you.
But the key is to make learning about the STEM fields part of every aspect of what we do from a very early age. And we want to make it fun. And so part of our challenge in our schools, and we're very committed to and have been for the last 8 years in transforming our schools and make sure there are equal opportunities all across the city. But we can do better around the STEM fields. We know that whatever your job is in the future, you're you're going to have some competency around science, technology, and engineering, and we want that to be part of everything that we do. But not just in the schools. Part of our coding camps are at parks and recreation. So after-school activities, summer activities can focus on STEM, on the STEM fields and activities, and making them fun.
How do we all get involved in that? Should Google be running a summer camp?
Yes, Google should take, they should take, we have 14,000 young people signed up for summer jobs, and Google can certainly work with some of them. We have a focus also on 22 to 24-year-olds that may be disconnected from school and jobs that I think Google can definitely help us with. Google and others can help us coach and train other people to train our students and young people. And get involved. In addition to Parks and Rec and our libraries, we're going to have a maker spaces, and we're always looking for volunteers to help us run those spaces.
I know we'll be followed by people from the Case Foundation will be on the next panel.
Good.
And I was riding on the Rise of the Rest bus with Steve and Jean Case as we went from Charleston, Nashville, and then down to New Orleans a month ago, talking about how cities that aren't in Silicon Valley are trying to be part of a Rise of the Rest because they're connecting their core strengths to innovation. What is it you see that's the core strength that Washington will bring to this?
Well, we are attracting a lot of young people to this city, and we have done it, and we are attracting a lot of technologists to the city as well, kind of organically. We have a growing entertainment and creative economy. We have great restaurants. We have great opportunities for people. And so now what we have really focused on doing is how do we get in the gaps where the technologists are telling us this is what we need in Washington. And so making sure we're a good place to do business for technologists, a good place for people to move around and have opportunity, a good place to attract capital to invest in these companies. That will be our key. And so the message that we like to spread that Washington is more than the Capitol and the White House. People live here, they raise families here, they're building fantastic businesses here, in hiring a lot of great Washingtonians.
One of the things that surprised me on the Rise of the Rest tour, people would come on the bus or come on the Mardi Gras float in New Orleans and make pitches. Only half dealt with technology. We sometimes conflate innovation and technology, but there were people doing innovation in food, in social services, in
Absolutely.
oyster reefs and wetland restoration. Talk us about non-tech innovation.
Well, this is one thing that my staff had got me focused on this month as well. And I'll tell you that we started off the month, we really kicked off innovation by talking about small businesses. And Anna R. Harvey, who directs our small and local business department, is also here. And so how we are creating great CEOs is also part of our innovation efforts. Another way that we're taking innovation out and focusing on non-tech innovation is through the arts. We have a wonderful arts commission. I see one of our commissioners, Rona Friedman, is here, and how we are better investing in the creative economy in Washington.
Give me an example of arts connecting to innovation.
One thing that we just launched were innovation districts, where we're looking at land that we already own, parks that we've already invested in, and using them as a platform for artists or other innovators. So whether it's music or whether it's the visual arts, we're going to make those districts available to our growing creative class.
One of the great places for innovation is the education sector.
You bet.
And it comes generally from empowering innovative leaders to have some autonomy in running schools, whether it's charter, district, whatever. I think you're the second.
You're talking our language.
Right. Well, I'll let you then just take it from there.
Well, certainly. Well, you know that we, families in the District of Columbia, have a lot of choices, and our focus now is how we leverage our public education dollar. So whether it's in the traditional public schools or it's in our public charter school sector, we are looking for ways to kind of spark that competition between great thinkers around education. and it's working. That's what we found. We're really at a place now in Washington where we're just making sure that we're getting the most out of every public education dollar when we look at our two sectors. And that's part of why Jenny is here. You may know that Jenny founded, and she's going to have her first graduating class from E.L. Haynes Public Charter School. But I brought, she was the founder, cool. Yes. But we brought her into the government, and it took a lot of, work on my part. But we got her into the government because part of our opportunity now is to make sure that a pretty mature public charter school sector and our traditional public schools that we're leveraging the two sectors and that they're not like feeding off of each other. And so that's a challenge that we're working with now. And Jenny is the one to lead that effort.
So how do Jenny, Kaya, and then the charter school sector help spur each other to innovation rather than fight each other?
Well, I think that we have seen, and this is one thing I know about parents, that they vote with their feet. So when they have a really good program, whether it's in the traditional public schools or in the public charter schools, that's where they're going to go. I think that we can do better by learning the best practices one from the other. And Jenny is going to help us do that. So we have one of our public charter schools that is doing X really well. Then we want more people to learn about that. And the same is true for our traditional public schools. And so I think personally that there are things that DC public schools will do really, really well, and we're going to double down on those things. And then where the parents want choices in other areas, they'll make those choices as well.
I'm going to use this opportunity just to mention that we at the Aspen Institute have recruited Raj Vinakota, who founded the Seed Academies, to do youth engagement and education. I've worked with Ann Friedman quite a bit, who's been chair of the Seed Academy, so that we're going to try to work with you, I hope, on this. What field is most ripe for innovation now? If you could just, boom, hit something hard here.
I think the human services are. I think that we've done a lot in transportation. So how we have a big focus in DC over our workforce training dollars right now. And we spend $100 million every year, and we're not that clear on what we're getting for those $100 million. We know the people in our city that need to be connected to sustainable employment. Largely, we know where the skills gaps are. So we, I think, can use innovation and tech, especially technology, to make sure we're making better use of those dollars and better connecting people to opportunity.
You grew up in Northeast. I think
I
you
did.
went to Elizabeth Seton, a Catholic parochial school.
Yes.
And you saw the innovation grow up in your neighborhood. I mean, Northeast is starting, have innovation corridors too. Tell us your personal experiences and how they help inform what you do. I'm a biographer.
You're
I tend to get personal
okay.
at times.
I got it. I wasn't
An amateur
expecting that one, but
biographer.
so I think my personal experience just would suggest that I was raised with a high value on education, high value on being able to take a lot of information and persuade other people. That's why I do politics, and also to challenge myself to areas that don't come as easily to me. And so that's why when I walk around the city and talk about technology and talk to girls and talk to underserved communities, I always challenge them to not think it's too hard or not go into the science fields because it doesn't come as easy to them, and not be fooled by the notion that whatever job they have in the future won't require them to be competent in the science, technology, engineering, and math fields. And so we're really pushing people to explore all of their talents, and even if the core of their talent isn't in technology, to be competent, because they're going to need it to compete.
You said you'll be mayor of all of the city. Explain what you're going to do in Anacostia to make sure they're part of this whole process.
Well, Anacostia is actually, I think there's so much promise for Anacostia, not just all of not just Anacostia, but all of Ward 8 and Ward 7. Oftentimes in Washington, when people talk about closing gaps, they're talking about our east of the river communities with west of the river communities. And I'll just tell you this. I do a conference every year to talk to retailers about coming to Washington, and I use it as kind of a bellwether of what's happening in each of the city's 8 wards. And more, we have just about all the retailers that we want. We just don't have them every place that we want. And this year, I almost fell off my chair because I really think there's going to be a race to get into Anacostia in my first term. And so that's what we know is really coming. So how do we prepare communities for that type of interest and investment? Because we know what happens when you get a big retailers go in. Other people follow with big incomes, housing prices soar, and before you know it, the people that have lived there forever don't live there anymore. So we have had that experience in many places in our cities, some faster than others. So I think that we have the opportunity to get in front of it to prepare residents and small businesses for the huge price demands that are going to come their way. Now, before I was mayor, I was a ward council member, and so I've had the opportunity to usher in a lot of development projects, to invest in affordable housing all over the city. And people love progress. And believe me, we love the progress that Washington has experienced. But with progress comes that anxiety. And so I always start my conversations with the community with this: nothing stays the same. It's going to get better. It's going to get worse. I choose better. And so how we implement better in Anacostia and other parts of our city is the challenge that Brian has, who's the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and he's here and working with our Deputy Mayor for Greater Economic Opportunity, whose job it is to help us close these gaps.
One of the interesting things you've just raised is the resistance to what I will call gentrification. Mm-hmm. And, Richard Florida writes about when the creative classes come in and the innovators come in. We've seen that a bit on 14th Street corridor. Yeah, yes. A lot. You're probably seeing it on 8th Street in your old segment of town. And now you're saying it could happen to Anacostia. How do you balance that, where you get innovation, you get young entrepreneurs in, you get small businesses in, but they displace people?
Well, I think that we haven't done as well as I think we could have or should have with more intentional planning in advance of where we saw corridors rapidly change was when the metro came in, or we saw it on 8th Street when we put the streetcar tracks, which will run soon. Will run. By
the way, what will happen when those streetcars run? Will that change?
It's already changed. The promise of streetcar changed things, attracted an investment, and I would argue that it came with the public infusion of hundreds of millions of dollars. We saw it with Metro. We see it with streetcar. So I suggest that we could have done things better. So right now we're looking, for example, to the property that the district owns and making sure that we're leveraging inclusive housing all over the city in advance of where we see the next wave of investment.
And finally, because I know you have to go, what could people in this room do to make sure that every kid in Washington, every summer, every after school, every whatever, has a chance for a job, a chance to become an innovator, an entrepreneur?
Well, I think that part of my job, and I realized this early on, was to make the big asks, and you know about the big asks. And so we can I have a program, for example, that the council didn't fund for next summer. That's about $2 million that would put 1,000 22 to 24-year-olds to work. So we will go out and look for some private investment, $2 million, 1,000 people that will put them on the pathway to the middle class. The chancellor has a initiative right now where we can transform every library in our DC public schools. It's going to cost about $15 million. And the big ask that we have is for $5 million investment. We're going to raise $5 and we have another $5 million commitment so that every school library can be transformed. And so that's one of the big asks that we have. We have a 500 for 500 challenge where we, as part of our Boys and Men of Color initiative, which we are raising $20 million privately. Can I say we're almost halfway there? And a part of that challenge, in addition to building a specialty school, we're focusing on literacy and early intervention, and we need 500 mentors to work with boys that have been identified that need literacy training. So everybody here can do that.
How do you just sign up? Go to
DC Public Schools, and you can find us at dc.gov and look for DC Public Schools and sign up for the 500 for 500.
Sounds great. Well, I can think of no better way to kick off our Center for Urban Innovation and what Jen Bradley, Eric Lavin, and others are doing. I know you have to leave, but I want to give you a round of applause and maybe give you just a moment to say hello to people in the room. So anybody wants to just come up and informally talk or ask a question? Let me look at the mayor's handlers and say, can we do it more? Yeah. All right. Anybody have anything? Or just, we can make this informal. Why don't I introduce you to, and I think you probably know Ann Friedman.
Yes,
and
of course.
Thelma and all, but
All right.
thanks.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Really good.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor. Really appreciate it.
Thelma is like one of the great civic leaders in Washington. And you know what? She was just writing down, I can find part of that money. Right?
That's a good one. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Sure, I'm going to actually go back and grab a cup of coffee, and I'll stand in the back.
The nice thing about working with Walter Isaacson is that his New Orleans roots are never far from the surface. So you never know when there's going to be some jazz-like improvisation that takes us all by surprise, but also I hope brings out the best in us by getting us a little looser than we might otherwise be. So I appreciate so much the mayor and Walter Isaacson for having that compelling discussion.
Jen, can I interrupt?
Absolutely.
We happen to have, because he was wandering the halls, Ben Cerf, who, with all due respect to Al Gore, actually did invent the internet. Ben was the person who wrote the IP TCP protocols and worked at the Google. He said that he was just fascinated by this, might even ask a couple of questions. So, having written an entire chapter in my book on Ben Cerf, I wanted to welcome him here as the epitome of an innovator.
Do you want to say a few words to the assembled?
Actually, I'd be delighted. I hadn't planned on this, but I'd never pass up an open microphone, right? But you know, in Washington, you're either running for office or running for cover, and I never know which. This is a really important topic, and I'm so glad to see all of you here, and I'm glad the mayor took time out of a busy schedule, to talk to us about her aspirations and her plans. I'd like to suggest to you that there is an interesting international effort underway called Smart Cities, and it has a lot to do with instrumentation to begin with. There are activities, fairly intense ones, going on in a number of places around the world. In Chicago, for example, Argonne National Laboratory has a fairly major experiment going on instrumenting the city to observe, whether we're looking for toxic pollutants, we're trying to understand consumption of resources, trying to understand traffic patterns and things of that sort. The same things are going on in China. I was visiting there. I went to 4 cities last week. And I could see similar kinds of activities going on. In Barcelona, there is a major activity in smart cities. And so those of you who are interested in that aspect of city evolution might want to look for an excuse to go to Barcelona, which is not a bad time to be there at this time of year. So in addition to observing the city and understanding how it is being consumed, I think one of the most important things that we can do is to derive from what the mayor was talking about. What is it? What services are the citizens looking for? What do they need? And what's not being satisfied? What requirements are not being fulfilled? And what tactics and strategies can we apply in order to fill those gaps? I hope that technology and innovation can be part of that, but let's not get trapped into thinking innovation is only about technology, because it's not. It's about being smart about what it is we do and how we do it and who does it. So this is one of the things I hope in the course of today that you'll be able to uncover is clever ways of doing things differently that work better. That can be better for all of us. So I'll get out of the way. I know you've got a whole program going. I'll hang around for as long as I can, and I have meetings I have to take care of as well. But congratulations for doing this. We need more of this, Walter. Keep at it.
Thanks so much. It's really an honor to have you be able to speak to us today. And I think that Google's increasing presence in the heart of cities like Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles speaks to one of the reasons why we're here today, and one of the reasons why Aspen created the Center for Urban Innovation, which is that cities are hubs of invention and innovation, both in our nation and around the world. I'll take a moment now to give a really brief history of the Aspen Institute for those of you who may not be familiar with our organization. The Institute was founded in 1949 to create a gathering place for thinkers, leaders, artists, and musicians from around the world to step away for a moment from their daily routines and reflect on the underlying values of society and culture. For more than 60 years, the Aspen Institute has provided a forum for people to share ideas, analyze problems, and build consensus on how to resolve the major challenges of our day, from global security to intergenerational poverty to larger issues of citizenship, belonging, and justice. I'm so pleased that two of our trustees, Ann Friedman and Thelma Duggan, and one of our lifetime trustees, Alma Gildenhorn, could join us today. So please give a round of applause. The Center for Urban Innovation is one of Aspen's newest programs. And as I said, it's premised on the belief that cities and regions are the wellspring of innovation in the United States. It's hard to imagine, but 20 years ago, when I started in this field, people were actually questioning whether we needed cities at all. People believed that these dense, diverse, and sometimes messy and challenging environments were obsolete, and that everyone, as Walter said, was going to telecommute or sort of beam themselves where they needed to be. Now, though, it's abundantly clear that cities and regions concentrate the ingredients of innovation, and they're where ideas are born, developed, funded, brought to market, and deployed to change the world. So the task of the Center for Urban Innovation is to direct some of that innovation and creativity that's bubbling up in our cities and direct it towards the unfinished business of making cities places of great opportunities for all residents. Since I took this job in January, people have asked me, okay, so really what is urban innovation? Urban innovation is something like Hand Up, a crowdfunding platform that allows homeless people and those in need to collect donations for things like laptops, dental work, or the uniforms and tools that will help them connect to the workforce. Urban innovation is an app like See, Click, Fix, which allows anyone to report non-emergency issues to local governments and thereby care about and improve their neighborhood. Urban innovation is groups like DC Central Kitchen and La Cocina VA that not only feed the hungry, but do so while training unemployed or homeless people to work in food service. So our job is to find great examples like these and create forums like today's to encourage the spread and replication of these ideas and others, so that the challenges of our cities stop looking impossible and start looking really interesting to the funders, inventors, and entrepreneurs that are creating new solutions every single day. And so that people who don't right now have access to the tools of innovation that many of us in this room take for granted are also included as problem solvers, creators, and innovators in their own right. We have a particular commitment to supporting urban innovation directly in the DC area through our Urban Innovation Lab, which will provide space, entrepreneurial guidance, and the benefits of the Aspen Institute's knowledge and networks to high potential entrepreneurs working on some of our region's last mile social and economic problems. My colleague Eric Lavin, who's been called out and has moved, so he's a very nimble guy. My colleague Eric Lavin manages the lab, and if you're an entrepreneur with a great idea for improving the lives of folks in the greater DC region's underserved neighborhoods, Eric wants to meet with you. It's true. In the panel discussion part of today's program, we'll carry through and build on some of the themes that Mayor Bowser and Walter discussed, such as being intentional about focusing resources for innovation, or how the government can connect to problems that the market might not lead people to discover. We'll talk about innovation outside of the tech sector, and particularly the new frontiers for innovation, the next big sectors that are ripe for disruption. So once you leave today, I hope you'll have a sense of the benefits that arise when innovators turn their attention to community problems and when people, no matter where they live or what they earn, have the chance to realize their own ability to be innovative or to be entrepreneurial. I hope you'll be thinking about what are the choke points that are making it hard for us to maximize the benefits of innovation in our cities. And finally, I hope you walk away with an understanding of how different sectors and how you yourselves, as Walter and the Mayor challenged you, can work differently so that the benefits of innovation and the ability to create are shared throughout our cities and our region, starting here in the District of Columbia. I'd like to introduce our panel now. It's a great group, and again, you don't want to hear me talk about them, you want to hear them talk. So this will be a one-sentence introduction, and their full biographies are in your packets. We have Mary Brown, who's the Executive Director of the DC Promise Neighborhood Initiatives. Donna Harris, the co-founder and CEO of 1776. Sheila Herrling, Executive Vice President for Social Innovation at the Case Foundation. And Dan Winston, the Head of Strategy and Business Development at Split, which is a transportation startup that launched just last Thursday. So it's a very busy startup time, yeah. So here we go. So Mary, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about the neighborhood that you work in with the DC Promise Neighborhood Initiative and about the innovators and entrepreneurs that you see in the Kenilworth Parkside community.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Eric, for coming out and visiting us. DC Promise Neighborhood Initiative is actually one of 12 demonstration sites coming out of the White House funded by the Department of Education with the charge to develop a cradle to college to career pipeline. Sounds good, could be really rhetorical when you really get down into it and the hard work that it really takes. Kenilworth Parkside is a very interesting community. It's in the far eastern part of Northeast DC. To the west, we have the Anacostia River along with other parklands. To the east is literally I-295, okay? And then to the south, we have a decommissioned Pepco plant. And then to the north is the borderline for Maryland. And even though right adjacent to Kenilworth Parkside, we have the very kind of pristine the aquatic gardens known for the spring lotuses, this still is a community that is definitely marginalized and that is very isolated from many of the economic and social amenities that others enjoy in the District of Columbia. Because there's transportation challenges, it's literally a food desert, there's no access to grocery stores. And so what we have is this perpetuation of intergenerational poverty right within our particular footprint. What have I found there? Brilliant people who have lived in this community. I think one of the keys to urban innovation is looking at the people indigenous to the community as the asset, and not looking at it as we're coming in to impose an innovation. Rather, we're going in to see what innovations have already existed. And two that I could think of right off the top is this one group called Dance Visions. This is a wonderful woman who lived in the community. She loves dance. So what do we do? Just like DC Central Kitchen, it came from a passion of an amazing founder that I was loving hanging out with just today. But it comes from a passion that she had. That's another point with urban innovation. Oftentimes when approaching communities that are marginalized, we think, oh, well, we look at the need. What do you need? What are your needs? And we love measuring the needs, and we need to because that is important. But also what's important is to look at the passion. What are the passion of those indigenous to the community? Because there you will find many innovations. So Dance Visions is this amazing group, started off very small. They were there before DC Promise. And now that DC Promise is there, we're able to work with this group. They're award-winning dance group, but we're able to work with this organization and helping them through our data and evaluation department measure success. Not only dance, but how the involvement in dance and involvement in movement is actually helping these young people improve self-efficacy in their academics. And another is Leah's Rainbow. Here was a mom and pop's daycare facility. And now, and on her own, became a for-profit entity, doing well, serving the community. And with the work of DC Promise Neighborhood, we're able to connect with partnerships and resources to further help that particular social entrepreneur expand. So, and there are many, many more. But that's who we are, and we're loving what we're doing right now.
Thanks. Sheila, can you talk a little bit about why the Case Foundation sees entrepreneurship, which also obviously includes innovation, as a way to close the opportunity gap, and how the Case Foundation thinks about the kinds of neighborhoods that Mary has just described?
Happy to. Thanks for having us, and just a shout out to Jennifer. You couldn't get a better person to lead this initiative. Her work, which spans decades, and as she said, was at some point, in the league of dying. Finally, you were well ahead of your time, and it's really glad to see you on top of this perch now. So the Case Foundation, for those of you who don't know, is the family foundation of Steve and Jean Case, of tech pioneers, early AOL founders. And so this is their family foundation. We are 18 years old. And so it should come as no surprise that deep in their DNA is a belief of entrepreneurship driving growth and rebuilding communities. Equally important to them is this notion of constantly leveling the playing field. And so throughout the history of the foundation, there has almost always been an entrepreneurship initiative underway. So early days in the foundation, an initiative called Power Up, which was about putting computers and online access into underserved communities. So that was in the early days. Then they also had a big effort, Startup America, which Donna was a key leader in. It was originally a White House initiative, starting startup hubs across America and trying to, basically start the belief that entrepreneurship is a traditional pathway for growth, for jobs, for building communities. That initiative went global and morphed into a group called Up Global in over 100 cities in every state in the United States, again, building this ecosystem of entrepreneurship. Now, seeing the digital divide growing and the economic divide growing, we are in very early days of rebuilding, as Jennifer was talking about, an initiative called Inclusive Entrepreneurship. Still early days, which is why this is really exciting. So give me your ideas, pound the questions. It's feeling increasingly like crowded space. And so we do have to figure out what is our niche, but it is along generally the lines of democratizing entrepreneurship, of getting entrepreneurship and venture capital beyond the 3 cities that own it right now. 75% of venture capital goes to San Francisco, Boston, and New York. So how do we get that to the many other cities in the United States where there is entrepreneurship activity happening, and particularly, how do we get it to of color, women, youth? So participating in entrepreneurship. We think, like Jennifer, that the answer is in the cities. And as Mary said, I love this notion which we share of people in the cities who are living there know what those problems are. They're already working on those problems, so they're already your entrepreneurs. Those are your assets. I love so much that you talk about it as the asset, not the person in need, right? So how do you build that community? How do you find them, grow them, support them, and connect them? So a lot about networking. And so I'll stop there, and happy to go into any of our partners where we're experimenting right now in Q&A.
Donna, tell me a little bit, you have this history of being a startup entrepreneur, working with Startup America, and now 1776 is really at the nexus of government, entrepreneurship, innovation, and community. Do you think that entrepreneurs are more or less likely to focus on underserved communities than they were 3 to 5 years ago, which is basically the 19th century in startup time?
Yeah, I don't even remember 3 to 5 years ago. It's a really interesting question. It's actually one that we spend a lot of time thinking about, and it's actually a pretty troubling question. So, yes, entrepreneurs are more inclined because there are now tangible examples of companies that are doing things in the civic or social space that are getting successes, right? So we have a company like O-Power, which is tackling a big social challenge of energy and sustainability. They're local. They were able to grow large enough to have an IPO, right? So when entrepreneurs see that there's a high growth trajectory, they're more likely to emulate that. The challenge is that we have a bifurcation in the tech community that you're either on a unicorn trajectory, meaning you're trying to build that $1 billion, let's go public, I need a big exit company, or you're a mainstream business, right? And we don't see that as a continuum, and we should, because there are many, many really, really interesting businesses that will never be a $1 billion company that will have massive social impact. And the venture mindset of it's either or causes a lot of those companies not to get the funding and not to be as successful as they want to be. Interestingly, though, a lot of venture funds, ours included, view those kinds of companies as a huge opportunity. When you look at, here in Washington, D.C., imagine many of you in this room, the contacts that you have in your smartphones, they're probably gold to a startup like an entrepreneur we have here on the panel, right? So being in a city and mobilizing the connections, he's like, yes, please, I'm up here, here's my
Just
card.
throw your business cards, actually, up on the stage.
The thing that we've learned, we just released a study called Innovation That Matters a week and a half ago, and it was about what is the model that a city can employ to drive more civic innovation. And there's no surprise that basically the big takeaway is that it's all about the networks. It's all about how do we get the entrepreneurs connected into a community and get people like you all in the room opening your contacts, being mentors, helping opening doors, so that we reduce the floundering that is going on and we can help these entrepreneurs find the fundable models that are also scalable and impactful. That's where nirvana lies.
So Dan, you are a new company founder. I'm sure it will be a unicorn. Tell us a little bit about your company Split, a transportation startup, and whether you see it as a potential transportation solution for communities that are not well served by other options, and if not, why not?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for including me on this panel among such distinguished guests. This kind of event makes me really excited about the future of cities and DC and everywhere else. So absolutely, we see Split as an option for communities, places, neighborhoods that might not have other options. That's kind of why we started it. A little bit about Split. We are a convenient, affordable, sustainable way to get around, where we work through an app. You request a journey, a trip, and a car comes and picks you up. That car might have somebody already in it, and you're definitely going to be picking up and dropping off other people along the way, because we have really, really sophisticated technology that instantly finds overlapping trips. So it's just kind of a different math. We're putting more people into fewer cars. Right now the cars are sedans and wagons, just the personal cars of our independent contractor drivers here in DC. So We think there's just a big gap in transportation. If you think about maybe a trip from Shaw, 9th and R to Georgetown, you're still right in the middle of DC, which has a great transportation network, lots of buses and metro, and bike share, all sorts of options for you. But to go from 9th and R in Shaw to M in Wisconsin and Georgetown, you could take a bus. It cost you $1.75, and you'd probably walk a quarter mile on each end, maybe take you 45 minutes. You could hail a taxi or call an on-demand service like an Uber or a Lyft, and that'd be point-to-point, 15 minutes, but without any surge pricing or anything like that, it'd probably be $9. But realistically, maybe it's going to be more like 12 or 15 bucks if you're trying to go somewhere during rush hour. Split, because of the sharing, the real sharing that our technology facilitates, would be 16 to 24 minutes, and it'd be $4.50. And we make that guarantee of the arrival time before you book your trip, so you can kind of count on it. And we tell you how much it's going to cost before you book your ride. And just so you know, my background and the background of everyone at Split is in transportation and economic development. I was a couple of years ago working, helping to manage a Metro Access operation. Metro Access is Metro's paratransit. So for people in wheelchairs who can't get onto the bus, helping them get to the grocery store or anywhere they might need to go. And I remember our drivers who were coming to drive the buses, whether they were out of the garage, we had a garage in Hyattsville and even a garage in Northeast DC, they all had to drive. If their cars broke down, they didn't have any other options because the buses in Metro often weren't running reliably at the times they needed to get to work. And a taxi would cost a couple hours of wages often. And so I just thought, gosh, there's got to be something in the middle. We've got to be able to use technology to create an option that's affordable. And so we really created Split because it can appeal to a really broad range of people to use every day.
So, Mary, what do you wish that outside innovators knew more about your community that would help them kind of extend their network? So if you were to invite Dan to Kenilworth Parkside, what would you want him to see? What would you want him to better understand so that his products and the people that he talks to every day when he sits at 1776 could say, oh, well, I think there might be a market opportunity there?
Yeah, so that's a full question. I can respond to that. So again, there in Kenilworth Parkside, transportation is a major issue. If you either have to walk or catch the metro to go to a Safeway that really isn't that far, but there's a huge highway that cuts you off from that. And what's so interesting, and this is where the cultural piece comes in, and oftentimes we tiptoe around that when we talk about innovation. Gosh, let's stay away from race and gender and all those things that make everybody squirmy. But quite frankly, Lyft and Uber and all those guys and it was almost a godsend, definitely for African American males who could never get cabs to take them to our end of the community. That is the reality. So I hope, brace yourself, bulletproof there. I hope I didn't shoot anybody down. But I think that I owe a debt of gratitude to this community, so I want to fairly represent the truths that we all get a little squeamish about. So I would basically come out and tell. Now, what's so interesting is that, yes, most of the people in our community will have a phone. They will have an iPhone. So they would definitely be able to use your app. I mean, there are people in the community that use Uber. But likewise, there are those who may not because of the socioeconomic challenges that our families face. What I would want people to really know about Kenilworth Parkside and to want to come out and really invest with us is to basically say, and about Promise Neighborhood and the value add that we're bringing, because what we're doing now is one of the things I've told my team, we're not coming here to save lives or even build bridges or save the downtrodden. You are diamond hunters. You are coming in. The innovation is to come in and look at where are the gaps. What is the community saying? Putting your ear to the ground, listening to what their needs are, and then also learning what their passions are, and then us providing supports and opportunities in a network and serve as a backbone to fill those gaps. And so I would want any potential investor to know that. I would want a potential investor to know that the community is growing and building, definitely on the economic side. I mean, we're having new housing, so that's a touchy piece. That's a real, we could have a whole nother workshop on that. But you know, there are new homes being built. There are improvements being made. We have a wonderful EduCare facility that's a state of the art, providing wonderful child care for 0 to 5. We have a Unity Health Care facility there for health in the area. We have 2 schools that are on one DC public school, Neville Thomas, that DCPS is working hard to continue to push an upward trajectory. And we have Cesar Chavez Middle and middle school and high school. And we have amazing people who really want to be a part of positive change in the community and who want to make connections far beyond that particular footprint. Over 97% African American. We have our challenges. We have 5,700 residents, 2,000 of whom are children, only 30% that go to school in the footprint, with 70% going to 180 schools outside of the footprint. Interesting dynamic when you're supposed to build a place-based collective impact model. But what's great is that at DC Promise Neighborhood, we're finding ways to fill those gaps in partnership with members of the community. And that's what I would want you guys to know. Yeah.
So Donna, is there a role, most of the time we think of entrepreneurship and innovation way over here and government way over here. And again, 1776 is trying to find those areas of productive overlap. Is there a role for government in creating a different set of incentives, or either through regulation or information, making these underserved neighborhoods a little more legible, a little more entrepreneur friendly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a difficult question, because when you say yes, that sort of implies a whole set of other things. So one of the things I learned at Startup America, traveling the world and working on how do you build high growth startup communities outside of Silicon Valley. And what I found was that the most authentic work and the most impactful work was almost always being done by entrepreneurs themselves and not by government. But the people with the time and the budget and the imperative were government employees, right? The heads of economic development, the mayors, the city council, the government leaders. And so you have this challenge where if the government creates it, the entrepreneurs won't come, but the entrepreneurs don't necessarily have the time or the energy to do the creating because they're building their own businesses. And so we've spent a lot of time studying this, and actually when you look at where the world is going with tech and being tech enabling every single industry on the planet, it isn't just about industries where government is the regulator, it's about every industry where tech plays a role. And we are losing a huge proportion of our population who doesn't even know that that's happening, right? They don't know that they should be aware of it. They don't know that they could play a role in driving it, right? I mean, you talked about your population, and I think that that's right. The cheese has moved and no one even knew there was cheese to be had, right? So,
and we're like the cheese trackers.
yeah. So there's so many opportunities, right? Like the data question. You don't know where transportation options aren't happening if no one's tracking, right? The Uber example is a great one, where now we have the ability for people to go in and serve communities that the system wasn't quite set up to serve. I do think funding is an area that has not yet fully been explored. Back to my comment about either unicorns or Main Street businesses, the majority of companies that are tackling sectors that have a social impact, they're not going to be venture backable companies. That's just the reality, right? Venture capital firms, they're very focused on, if I cannot see my way to building a multi-$100 million potential IPO, massive exit company, I'm not going to invest. It's very black and white. And that excludes a lot of companies. Now, a company like Hand Up is a great example. You mentioned in your opening remarks, they're tackling homelessness, but they're doing it using a high-tech, highly scalable model. She can create probably a $500 million company if she plays her cards right.
She being Rose Broom, the founder.
Rose Broom, the CEO, and at the same time make a lot of impact. But she's a rare case. There's a need for companies to get funding in that middle ground that I think if government understands could really play a role in doing that. And increasingly, there are incubators and hubs like ours and members of our federation around the world who see those kinds of companies as really good investments, right? So you can co-invest together, still get, frankly, a double or a triple instead of a home run as a venture capitalist, have that funding be levered by the government and create the support to help that company grow. But the thing that these companies need more than anything are connections, and that's something the government can play a really, really big role in helping curate, make the call to action, right? How many of you have ever been asked to come and mentor a startup? Right?
Actually,
Talk about untapped opportunity here, right? So we'd love to see governments looking at how do you use the incubators, use the hubs and the resources in the community and make that sort of call to action, because my guess is that if I brought this one small room of people in to help the 31776 members, we would be able to identify a long list of potential highly valuable connections, right? That's not something I can do as an individual, but it is something that Mayor Bowser could do. It is something that the city could do. It is something that the major institutions, the foundations, and others can do in a community. So it's both and, it's not either or.
Okay. Sheila, the word foundations was invoked. Foundations, I think, are also taking a kind of a somewhat different approach to how they deal with social problems through things like impact investing and venture philanthropy, and filling in where the government doesn't choose to go and venture capitalists have no interest in going. Can you say a little bit about how that plays out from where you sit?
I mean, I think it feels like all the worlds are colliding, right? And I think that they are colliding in the social impact space. And so I may part a little bit with Donna on my sort of optimism that actually the next wave of disruption, I do think is going to be in the social sector, and I do think some of them will be venture-backed. If you're looking at healthcare and the massive amounts of money going to healthcare, you have Revolution Foods, and you do have some breakouts that are happening in the space. And I do think education and healthcare are going to offer, and the food industry are going to offer some potential to move in that space. From the foundations, I think where we're seeing value add is in sort of what I call the 3 Fs. So funding, of course, right? So foundations are typically funding. Also fostering collaboration. So a lot of what Donna's saying about the power of networks and the power of just connecting dots. So it's incredible, as sort of I went with Steve on the Rise of the Rest tour, and it's amazing how just the simple have a conversation at a cocktail party and then say, oh my gosh, you don't know so-and-so. And it's incredible that, yes, it doesn't displace the capital, but it really is quite something. So fostering collaboration, not just between entrepreneurs and funding, but government, ideas, innovators across all sectors, opening your Rolodex. And then fail. So the third F is a big one, which is philanthropy is in a unique situation to be a little bit more fearless and to fail not recklessly, but to take some big bets and build data along the way. And data in the foundation space, look, I'm a newcomer to this space. I'm 8 months into this job and largely am a government international affairs person with deep data So I really want to see what the data shows you. And the most interesting data is the failure data. So why did it fail? Where were your assumptions wrong? And then how can you learn from that and feed it back in? And so I think philanthropy for those willing to take the risks, which I feel very privileged to be at a foundation with big risk takers, is a huge contribution to this space. You mentioned impact investing. I mean, I think that is on the frontier of disrupting things across the board, government, private sector, but bridging the make profit but do good and not having to think that you have to take a financial loss to have a social gain, finding those opportunities and building them.
Dan, what could government or philanthropy do to encourage Split to work in the areas, again, outside its current service area, or to move to areas that you and I have talked about, the spread of poverty in the suburbs, which my former colleagues at Brookings have done so much to enlighten us about and uncover. Suburbs are hard transportation markets to crack. What could government do? Is it incentives? Is it information? Is it regulation to sort of force you into that market? How would they? Yeah, you give the entrepreneur yucky face, but how could government steer you in that direction?
Well, it's a very important question. It's one we think about every day at Split. And I should say, as context, Jennifer mentioned, we launched officially last week. So right now our focus is
You don't even come to me. I'm just outside your map.
let's draw a service area in the city where there are the most people doing the most things at the most times, just so we can have lots of trips and improve our sharing algorithms and make sure that our drivers are really happy and people and everyone is generating revenue so they're able to support themselves. And so we're going to expand because we think that the areas that are outside of that core are going to be one of our best markets. And what's really cool about our technology is that we can expand on a kind of block by block basis, just sort of put down some points, expand our area, and see if it picks up. And if there's a real need for it, it will support itself. But it's true that even though, as Mary mentioned, smartphone penetration is pretty high. Split and a lot of other technology companies are based around these technologies that do in some way represent a barrier to some people. And I can't think of any entrepreneur who wouldn't want to get their product into the hands of more people. And so I think one of the key areas in which foundations and governments can help is to sort of think about how do we lower the barriers to access these new products and technologies. So regulation to force us into it is one thing, but maybe there's is it payment by text? Is there that's what generates the demand to make the model work. Perhaps even with very little barriers to using the service, it doesn't quite work. There's just not quite enough demand for travel in a suburban area out in Prince George's County near where that bus garage was. Maybe in that case, there's a role we can step in and kind of bridge the gap financially to make it so that services like Split can cover a much broader set of areas. I think entrepreneurs are really eager to see their products expand to cover a wide range of areas. And I know at Split, we simply wouldn't have gotten started if we thought we were creating something for just a small group of people. So we're excited.
Can I just as one sort of example back to that, so we worked with a company called Ride Scout who launched at Washington D.C. as their first market, and they were struggling with this issue of, we're on the iPhone, you could download it if you go to the App Store, but our downloads are this, they're not this, and I need it to be this if I'm going to be a highly scalable company. Well, it turns out that the city had a vested interest in that as well, as did the universities. Because let's take the universities, the more students that were using Ride Scout when they were in Adams Morgan at the bar and needed a ride home back to their dorm and were in unsafe scenarios, the more that was beneficial to the university, because their value proposition to the parents was, we'll keep your kids safe. Same thing for the city. They actually had a vested interest in Ride Scout being successful because there was a richer data set that they would get about where were rides starting and ending, what other options were on the table, what did they choose, what time of day, what were the conditions, so that it could help the city evaluate what sort of transportation options. When you can find that sort of win-win intersection, that's where utopia comes, because the city can be a lever to help drive distribution and encourage the company to be able to get into markets and segments of the city that they wouldn't ordinarily choose to do. It helps the company because scale goes up, revenue goes up, usership goes up, which then drives growth for everyone. So it's finding that place where both the city and the startup and the consumer benefit, because that's where really interesting scale can happen.
Sheila, a lot of this goes to the idea of an innovation ecosystem, right? There are other great entities that are focused on civic innovation and government innovation and government change. But what we're starting now to understand is that innovation comes from networks of people. Donna's mentioned the word networks quite a lot. What do you think are the kind of characteristics of a healthy innovation ecosystem, and who has to do what to bring that system into good flourishing? So you do have those great intersections.
Such a good question, and I'm sort of laughing as I'm like, what's going to be the question? Because, again, as I said, we're at the very early stages of asking sort of those exact questions, and so I will just sort of start where we're at in our own exploration and then hope the others will jump in. But I guess to be a little bit I don't know, skeptical is like the word innovation in and of itself is a very problematic term, right? So it's thrown over everywhere. It's in my title. It's in probably, I don't know, half the people's titles in this room. And it gets very conflated also with entrepreneurship, right? And so it's sort of what is innovation, what is entrepreneurship? So I thought the conversation with the mayor and Walter was great because innovation can sometimes just be a new way of looking at a very old problem. And you just, the things align, as Donna was saying, like you sort of have the things aligning with, there's a problem that's identified. That's what entrepreneurs are, they're problem solvers. So what's the problem they're facing? I think innovation happens, and why we're looking at the city is because it's a little bit closer to the problems at hand. I think that there is, a bit of dissatisfaction with the ability of our nation's government to do things. And so you kind of crowd down to the community level, people with passion, people who are willing to just open up the space, right, to everybody who has ideas, and are also willing to provide incentives. So whether they're tax incentives, whether they're co-sharing space, private sector getting involved. And so I think when you have that combination of smart business aligned with government, aligned with universities, aligned with communities, you start having a bit of an ecosystem to move forward. But the bigger question, Jennifer, is a good one, and to be quite honest, we're just at the roots of trying to figure out what that means.
And I feel as though you just described what we're doing at DC Promise Neighborhood Initiative. And that's why it's so exciting for me, because there we are combining the universities, the academia, business, the education system, health, all of those pieces are coming together to look at all of the issues and the gaps that are in that particular community. I mean, our big vision is to end intergenerational poverty. I think one of the keys also to innovation is for us not to necessarily make economic development is very important, but not to make economic development the supreme imperative. To make certain that we not only intentionally but mindfully move into innovation and look at human capital and value just as much as economic development, value the capacity of individuals that are in the community to be able to transform their lives, their communities, and beyond, and to be a part of the entrepreneurial piece and to be a part of the technology piece. I think that's so very important because oftentimes the human dignity piece is often cast aside, and sometimes the drivers to innovation, it could oftentimes be skewed to economic development versus human development.
When you mentioned intergenerational poverty, I looked over and smiled at my colleague Ann Mosley, who runs the Ascend program at the Aspen Institute. They provided some technical assistance, as you know, at the beginning to the DC Promise Neighborhood Initiative.
Absolutely. We adopted the two-generation model.
So I just wanted to give her a shout out for all of the great work that she's done on this issue. Yeah.
I actually I was thinking of this term innovation ecosystem and wanted just to say I think DC is doing a really pretty great job of this. And I think about some of the resources that we've had, and again, we launched a couple weeks ago, so we're not able to fully explore all of it and trying to get our ducks in a row, so to speak. But if I think about it, at 1776, the business community and, for example, the product designer from another startup spending a couple of hours with us on our app just for free because we were there. There's this sense of we're all in this together, and then thinking about going and meeting with. We've had every person we've tried to talk to at the city has been so eager to meet with us and to we'll get you connected to the taxi cab commission, who is our official regulator, and we were invited to a hackathon and show up there bright early Saturday morning, and the Deputy Mayor Kenner and his entire team is there the whole day, and it's just like this isn't just talk, it's actual action. And then data, a lot of places talk about open data maybe, but in DC, we probably saved hundreds of hours because our data team was able to take where all the no parking zones were, overlay it on a map, find the alleyways and the fire hydrants, and identify safe, non-disruptive, and convenient places for our pickup and drop-offs to be made. And it was actually kind of easy if you can do some data analysis. And so I think that I've only been an entrepreneur in DC. I'm not sure if every other city is like this, but maybe they should be.
Well, I will say that what I hope it's not is actually cities that have gone through just mass crisis, right? So Denise Byrne is in the back. We are a funder of her Great Forward Cities program, which is a learning collaborative in 4 cities that has gone through disaster, right? So you have Detroit and New Orleans and Cleveland and Durham. But the first three are just, I mean, they've hit rock bottom. And so therefore everybody becomes innovative and an entrepreneur to rebuild their city. And so I hope it's not that that's required, but the open data piece is such a strong one, and reaching rock bottom sort of forced that space, right? It forced all those cities to open up their data, and again, I thought sparked a lot of innovation in the city.
So Donna, 1776 has actually done research on this, on what makes a good ecosystem. Are there things that haven't been covered yet in the panel that come up? Because you looked at cities, not the crisis cities. You went to Austin. You went to some of the places that have a more easily recognizable innovation ecosystem or innovation hubs.
Yeah, so we went to 8 cities. In every city, we spent oodles of time. We did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of roundtables with everyone from the mayor of the city, city council, investors, entrepreneurs, universities, citizens, sort of everybody within a 360-degree view. We looked at it through 2 lenses. One is, what does it take to build a basic ecosystem, right? Regardless of whether you're doing anything in the civic space, what does it take to have a vibrant ecosystem so you get the economic benefits of more startups equaling more jobs? And then overlaying on top of that, how are the cities performing when it comes to civic innovation? So really important problems like, how do we get all of our kids educated? How do we make sure that everyone has access to high quality health care? What do we do about things like homelessness and other human service issues, sustainability, transportation, and congestion? And what we found was not only the key element of networks, we developed a model of what an ecosystem looks like. And it is the entrepreneur and the city, but it is also the citizen in 3-part harmony. And with that, then there are a whole host of other supporting actors that have to be engaged in the ecosystem. And we found, much like you mentioned on the Rise of the Rest tour, the sheer act of going in and convening the roundtables, people in the cities were meeting each other for the first time, which was mind-boggling, right? You have an education roundtable where you're bringing together education entrepreneurs, education investors, the innovative teams from the public schools and the universities, and they've never met each other, right? There's problem number 1 right there. Like, let's make sure that we all know each other. There is an open invitation for anybody who wants to participate in that space to become part of that community. Then the other key thing that we found is that when you're doing basic ecosystem building, all of the attention so far has been on what are the ingredients you have to have, right? You have to have density, and you need mentors, and you need capital, and you should probably have some co-working spaces, and you should have meetups and events. And so everybody's working their way down the checklist, furiously putting all the ingredients in place. And what we found was that it's still not achieving outcomes, right? So we aren't having more starts. We aren't reducing the failure rate of the companies. In fact, we have less starts, and the failure rate hasn't declined. So overall, net, we're worse off. Right. So what we looked at was, how do you shift from, clearly that's not enough, right? You have to do those things, but it isn't sufficient. So we studied and looked at this issue of passive versus active, and how do you shift a community from simply putting a buffet together and hoping that people will know what to consume, or that they will even know the buffet exists, versus helping people, bringing them to the buffet, helping them navigate the buffet, and actually playing an active role as a community in moving them through the stages of startup. And then we also learned that most communities don't even know that there are stages to startups, right? So it's idea, and then somehow something happens and they grow. But there are actually 4 stages that they go through. And if you understand the stages, you can understand how, as a community, you can move into an active role of actually helping them, right? So early on, when someone's at the idea stage, they need a lot of education, they need a lot of mentoring, they need to learn about what does it take to build a startup, and do I really know my industry, and who are my competitors, and how does one do this? The further they get on that trajectory, the more open doors, customer contacts, relationships with potential channel partners, and capital become more important. So we've developed a model of how do you actually know what the startups need at different stages. And it turns out that is the same whether they're dealing with civic entrepreneurship or they're dealing with, I want to put a consumer dating app in the App Store. It's pretty much similar. So we haven't yet solved it, but what we have started, we hope, is a dialogue where these 8 cities, we're getting ready to embark on round 2 of Innovation That Matters, where we're going to be studying more than the initial 8, and we're also going to be comparing U.S. entrepreneurship to international entrepreneurship, so there will be another layer to that. And our hope is that it's at least starting the conversation that there is an ecosystem that is related to civic innovation. It is a different ecosystem than basic tech, and it does require much more action as opposed to passivity than I think previous models have said.
Yeah, and might I add, and also understanding a culture of environment and establishing alignment and shared intention. Because what we're finding at DC Promise Neighborhood is that as you're bringing all these players in to create this type of ecosystem, it's very important for the narrative of that particular community to be honored. And then it's important to have the only piece I heard missing from what you described, I think you've got the nuts and bolts, but it's that cultural alignment piece, it's that culture of environment piece, and it's that shared intentionality towards a shared vision. Because what you find is different partners come in and they've got other little agenda going here and there and here and there. You're trying to go towards education, they're going all over. And so it's really working with the human capital to clearly define the intention, that vision, working hard to get the alignment, and establishing a cultural environment of all those players. And it is challenging.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. You made a couple of really great points earlier about it isn't about coming in from the outside and imposing it, right? The most effective communities that we found, it was very organic, coming from within the community. Mm-hmm. And then we found a troubling trend, which is that when you look at the placement of these high growth hubs and where the high growth entrepreneurship is coming, in every city we studied, it was the higher income, higher educated, predominantly white portion of town, right? Which is something that we've called out in our report as, it has to serve the entire city. Otherwise, it does become sort of this imposing only one demographic community, and being intentional that if you're really building a true ecosystem, you have to take purposeful steps to engage the entire community. It can't just be a subsection and then assuming that if we build it, they will come. It turns out they won't come because they don't know to come.
Since we did not have time for Q&A with Walter and the mayor, despite Walter's best going rogue efforts, I do want to finish up our panel conversation soon so we can kick it out to questions of all of you. So this is sort of our lightning round. Last question. You can see the monitor as well as I can. Dan, what do you think that people in this room need to know about urban innovation from an entrepreneur's perspective? What should all of us know so that there can be more people like you creating new solutions to our urban challenges?
I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that. I guess what I would say, from my perspective, is simply that entrepreneurs are all about growing their companies, and so if you think you've got a connection or a bit of knowledge to share, come find us and talk to us. We're always thinking every day about the different ways to look at the problems we're trying to solve. At Split, we've got this great algorithm that we're trying to bring to as many people as we can. We think we're on a pretty good trajectory right now. But we're so open and collaborative and excited to talk to just everybody. So I guess I get back to this kind of connections, the conversation. Let's all get in a room and talk about the ways we can help each other out. We're all on the same team. Entrepreneurship is at its best is about economic empowerment, leveling the playing field, creating access to different opportunities. That's the great thing about technology. And it's only by considering many, many different perspectives from within the companies and also outside of the companies that we can make sure that we are really and truly considering everyone who needs to have access to what it is that we're creating.
Okay. Sheila? what do you think, what would make your job easier as a philanthropist, as a funder, if we knew or how we could change our behavior so that your work could be more effective?
Well, help me unbundle this notion that we have of inclusive entrepreneurship. I mean, I think it is, not to end on a sad note, but I mean, the odds are stacked against you if you are not born into a rich family. They just are. And so it's the cost of education, it's the cost of repaying loans, it's sort of the cost of despair, but whatever it is, the data is showing you that that's true. And so how do we restack the odds? And so what is out there that you see working, that we can build upon, that we can invest in, and if it fails, we can learn from, but how do we do this better and really revive the American dream, which does feel like it's slipping, right? So how do we revive that? So please share your stories, share your ideas. So again, I mean, I think we're sharing the same things. Let's think about ways to have more things like this, Jennifer.
I got a whole center for you.
Where we get together groups of people who are willing to think and do and roll up their sleeves and share, not just their successes, but their failures.
Donna, you know the frame of the question by now.
Yeah, so I'll be the optimistic side of that, which I do agree with everything you just said. I mean, my husband is not only the first college graduate, but the first high school graduate in his family, right? So when I meet with my in-laws, I hear this example, I see it every day, at the kitchen table. But the optimistic side is, in the last 12 months, with 1776, we've traveled to dozens of cities and we've met with entrepreneurs all over the world. And hands down, the idea that we get it, there's an internet revolution at hand, but there must be more to the internet revolution than Angry Birds and Instagram. Right? If you think about all the great things and the power of technology that we have in our back pockets and we carry around, yet the companies that we hear about are, thin solutions. We're still struggling. But I see entrepreneurs all over the world who would say that same thing and who aren't letting the fact that they aren't building unicorn businesses or they're getting rejected by venture capitalists. They aren't letting that keep them from pursuing really important ideas. And I would just leave you with one takeaway, which is the next time you pick up the newspaper and you read about venture capital is so awesome and we're building these big, great unicorns and it's the end all be all, remember that only 0.02% of all companies take venture capital. Right? The majority of the companies that are growing and building jobs and sustainable solutions and long-lasting companies do not take venture capital. So think about this in terms of your personal call to action, right? There is no other organization or person out there who is going to figure out how to do this. The other is us, right? This is how we do it. Come and mentor, open doors, come up here and meet the entrepreneur in the room and ask him, don't just say, good for you, you're starting a company. Say, how can I help you? And say that to every entrepreneur you meet, and then follow through and do it.
Right. And I'm very quick. Thank you. I say come out and visit us at DC Promise neighborhood. Come and visit Promise there in Kenilworth Parkside for us to share more of our story and what we're doing and how we're building an ecosystem there in a very mindful way. And I would say walk away today maybe with a different way of thinking, that knowledge and data and evaluation is so critical. Economic development is so important. But what's more important is wisdom, which is this combination of knowledge and compassion. And compassion not in terms of charity, but when you look at yourself in the mirror, that you can think, oh, that little boy that looks like he might be, the little boy from El Salvador is the same as me. Or a little girl that looks maybe differently than is the same as me, so that all human beings, just as I do, looking in the mirror with all the networks I might have, with all the education you might have, that I am the same as the very people that we want to support in affecting positive change in their lives. And if you can walk away with that, that's huge for me.
Great.
Yeah.
So now we have about 10, 12 minutes for questions. My colleagues from the Aspen Institute have mics in the aisles. So we do want you to engage, so please do. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Patricia Fonegra. I'm the founder and executive director of La Cocina VA, which means the kitchen. We are a workforce and small business development in the food service industry, working with minority and immigrant communities. And I have a question for 1776. Do you support or work with nonprofit organizations? And if you don't, could you please share with us what's the concept behind it?
Sure. Yeah. So we get that question a lot. Thank you. So we actually don't. So to become a 1776 member, well, first of all, let me explain a little bit about what we do. So that gives context. So our objective is to really take the entrepreneurs that have what we think are both highly scalable and highly impactful ideas and help them to grow. So 100% of the things that we do as a team, all the services that we provide, are focused on people like this, right? What is it you need to grow? Who do you need to meet? What is the education you need? What are the doors you need opened for that? So we've made a conscious decision not to create a community that was moving beyond that sort of soup to nuts objective. So 100% of our members are for-profit, highly scalable companies. I will give the caveat that many of them are benefit corps, B Corps, which is a double bottom line structure for those of you who don't know. And Hand Up, the example that we've used earlier, they're actually a double bottom line company. What we do though is we work with anybody who contacts us. First of all, we're open to meeting. We do office hours with anybody in the community who wants to just talk about their idea, who is trying to figure out how do I get connected. There are all sorts of great resources in the city. We're just one of many. So we're happy to sit down and talk with you about who are the right people and organizations that you should be working with based on what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve.
Thelma, did you have a question?
I work a lot with youth. My name is Thelma Duggan. I'm on the Board of Trustees of the Aspen Institute. And one of the things that we do scholarship programs to college, but we also work with kids from early ages. And one of the things that we're confronting is what should we be preparing? What's the job market going to look like, say, 10 years from now when those kids in the 7th grade, are finishing high school, and what should we be preparing them for? And that's to anyone.
Well, Mary, you're kind of on the front line. So
Yeah,
what are you
I can
preparing
help
your
with
kids
that.
for?
So before coming to DC Promise, I've only been at DC Promise for a year, but almost 20 years of my life was spent building a nonprofit here in the district called Life Pieces to Masterpieces, which is an arts-based mentoring program for Black men and boys ages 3 to 25. That's experiencing great success, where these young men who normally would not graduate high school in those conditions, 100% of those gentlemen for the past 8 years have been graduating high school and then going on to either job-specific training or junior colleges or full colleges. One of the basic things is what you're talking, the whole STEM piece is definitely very important. We, of course, added the A, STEAM, because we think arts and human development is also very important. But I think that it's 5 basic areas that I know that we focused on at that time. It was definitely the human development piece, your values, who are you as a human being, a part of a shared humanity. The second, so that's kind of the foundation. And then the second are all the basics, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, definitely the technology piece. So I think I was really excited when the mayor was talking about, improving all the libraries so everyone can possibly have an opportunity. That was definitely the second piece. The third piece is definitely critical thinking. Oftentimes our children memorize a lot, but they don't learn how to, well, why is that the answer? And so that's another piece that I think is very critical to develop if we want to prepare our children for all of the opportunities. The fourth piece is definitely exposure. So having opportunities to come and meet people and seeing what's available. And the fifth piece, and this goes back to Ascend, is the mothers and the fathers and the family. That generation to generation piece is critical. And if the children can learn, the 2-generation piece that we're using at Promise Neighborhood is where we're working with both the mother and we're working with the child and the mother at the same time. That's also very critical. So when you have that family piece with all of that, I think that can give us a leg up.
So Dan, as somebody who's going to be hiring today's 7th graders in about 10 years, and I have one you should meet, what would you tell me that I need to tell my son that he needs to be working on, thinking about, knowing that whatever coding language he's learning on Khan Academy That's what he says he's doing. Whatever coding language he's learning on Khan Academy is going to be completely out of date pretty soon.
So I wonder if my answer is almost an atypical answer, because my educational background, what I studied in college was psychology.
Yeah.
So people say, well, I mean, psychology touches most anything you do, and in some ways you're always dealing with people, but there's not a direct line from psychology to business, or certainly not to transportation, engineering, or anything like that. And so what I think is really, really important is to have a grounding in the liberal arts, just because that's just kind of, it's just learning how to think and understand and be a bit creative about whatever it is that you're doing. And that's certainly not to diminish technical training, but I think that science, technology, engineering, math is so important, because those are the skills that are really going to drive the good jobs of the future. But what I would say to your son is, it can't be exclusive. And if there's just a good novel that you like to be reading, you know, on the side, or play the piano or something like that. And what I really think is important is that when we're increasing STEM education, we're not pushing out some of these other more enriching programs, or equally enriching programs, in a way that maybe isn't quite as linked to the job of the future, but is about sort of how do you think creatively. And I think that's a skill that's always going to be important.
How do we teach curiosity?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to that? Like playtime.
Wonder, the art of wonder.
Exactly.
So we've got some folks over here. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Carrie Ann Nadeau. I'm the founder of a social benefit corporation actually in Ward 4 here in the District of Columbia called Open Data Nation. The point of our company is to bridge between civic administrators and technologists who can use open data, so civic administrators who publish it and those who can use it. My question is really for the entire panel, and actually comes from my experience attending 1776 Challenge Cup, where I saw a lot of the people who are promoting their ideas were fundamentally connecting information to other people. They were all about connecting, and so is Split. It's about connecting a ride to a person or information to people. I'm curious to know how we can better support people to people, the people who are on perhaps in your neighborhoods. How do we connect, help them do their job better? Because it's not just about a product, selling a product that connects people to information, but helping people actually talk to other people. How do we do that?
Sheila, do you want to take that?
Well, I would just probably encourage you to turn around and talk to Denise there in pink. I mean, it's, so there we go, people to people right there, and I feel my job has been done. It really, because the Forward Cities piece is about, there is a big data component with the Urban Institute, and so that is very important to learning the lessons over this 2-year collaborative, but so much of it is actually bringing the people together between these 4 cities and having all of these people, so cities within like the city itself, the civic actors, the businesses, the money, right? So all in the same room trying to figure out how to do startups and how to create jobs and rebuild the communities are there learning from each other. So again, Donna's point, like how crazy is it that, and I'm sure Denise would say that this was the first time a lot of these people were in the same room. And not to undervalue that, but then they take it from the 1 city, people to people, to the 4 cities, all those people to people, and how are they learning? Alongside data, for sure, but alongside each other. And so I think your time is better spent talking to Denise than it is listening to me.
Yeah, and this will probably, you and then Alma, you get the last question.
So my name is Andrew Coy. I'm the executive director of the Digital Harbor Foundation, where we turned an old rec center into a tech center up in Baltimore. But my question goes back to this STEM education, or the education question. And given how many jobs in the tech sector didn't exist 20 years ago, and how many more that we don't even know are going to exist, how do we formally support informal learning? How do we create a context in which the students of today learn how to learn and learn to love learning, so that whatever tomorrow brings, they'll be ready for, right? So how do we formally support informal learning?
Yeah, I want to applaud that question, because frankly, I think that's the issue. And if you look at all the spans of the way learning is happening, we have this inherent mentality that it is the job of the school and the job of the university to do the educating, and then when you're done, right? So we've got sort of this big box view of education. And the reality is our economy has changed. We have bite-sized careers, right? You're going to do this job for a little while, and then you're going to do a different job, and then a different job, and then a different job, and then a job that didn't exist when you first started, right? So we have to think about how do we unbundle the learning experience and make it better aligned with the idea that we're going to have bite-sized careers, let's have bite-sized learning, right? So there's a lot of different emerging models of what's being tested, everything from, you talked about being online doing classes with your son, to communities of learning. Like 1776 ultimately is a community of learning. And it's sort of the informal nature of just getting outside the box of learning and having that experiential opportunity. The more we can have people having experiential learning, the better they will fully understand what it is they're undertaking and know if that's for them. If you think about how many of us in this room know or is the person who went to law school and isn't practicing law, right? That's like, right, that's the issue. Like the jobs, for people to really understand, what are these careers actually all about? What does it actually mean to be an entrepreneur? What does it actually mean to, code? Let's get small experiences so people can see if they like it. If they like it, let's give them enough education so they can get in and get started, and then think of it as an iteration and a lifelong process.
Great. Alma.
I'm Alma Gildenhorn. I'm a lifetime trustee of Aspen. I think I congratulate you, Jennifer and Eric. This has been absolutely wonderful, and our panelists also. I am very, very concerned about the inner city youngsters who try as best we can and give them every educational advantage, that we really just don't look at them where they are and what their family backgrounds are, the broken homes. I mean, just take a ride and go down into those areas. Yes, your programs are working, but there are just a multitude of young people who could work. I don't care how the world changes, you're still going to need plumbers. You're still going to need electricians. You're going to need welders. You're going to have, you need cabinet makers. And as you said, innovation is not just about technology. It's about meeting a young person where he is. You cannot pull people up by their bootstraps if they have no boots. And I think you have to think about when you go into the inner cities and all these young people are standing outside on the corners, what can you do to help them make a life for themselves? Your other solutions are outstanding, but I am so concerned about this underclass in every way that have no advantages, but you can give it to them. You can show them the way. And I think that's our next big challenge, the inner cities, so that you don't have young people with nothing to do, looting, rioting, getting into trouble. And it just causes a lot of grief for everyone. There is something that can be done. Thank you.
Do you want to state, that's very moving, because it almost reminds me of the poem, I believe it's Langston Hughes, what happens to a raisin in the sun? Does it, does it dry up, or does it explode? What does it do? And you hit on very good points, that this is amazing human capital. I live every day. I've spent over 30 years of my life working with the populations you've just described. Amazing diamonds, amazing potential. But sadly, from sometimes even the time of birth, challenges have riddled their lives, and then it's compounded by systems that don't work in their favor. It is a major challenge. However, if we can approach it with the clear compassion that I see in your heart and the sincere heart-to-heart concern that you have, I think if we can approach it from that standpoint, build these ecosystems that we're talking about, because that is our charge at DC Promise, but how to have everyone included. And sadly, that population you just described are often the ones that are kind of pushed to the side. We have to have something done to them. So, you've hit on a strong point. I actually don't have an answer, probably one of the reasons why I've dedicated my life to it, because I'm determined to go out figuring it out. But there's been a lot of victories along the way. And we just keep looking at the victories of the young people who have tapped into their resilience and have built the support and have had the support to achieve. It is possible if we begin to look at them as we look at ourselves, as having that potential. And but it's a big lift because we're talking about history, cultural context, policies, systems, and we're talking about just the nature of shared humanity.
Great.
So I thank you for that.
Great. I realize that I am standing between you and lunch, so this will be very, very brief. I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing their time today. The next time you'll hear from us at the Center for Urban Innovation is when our DC Urban Innovation Lab announces or has its entrepreneur showcase in September. We have your emails. We won't abuse them, but nor will we forget about them. So you'll all be receiving an invitation to that event. And again, I would like you to leave this room again thinking about three things, which is the benefits that happen when we connect innovators to some of the challenges that we still have in our urban areas, despite the amazing changes we've seen in the last 20 years. We've heard a little bit about the bottlenecks that keep innovation from spreading, and that the answer to that really is networks, but the deeper answer underneath that is compassion and interest in people and curiosity and a desire to make oneself available, but also to reach out to people and to say, I can help you or you can help me. And really, isn't it amazing that when we talk about innovation, it really does come down to, as Mary has said, our shared humanity and our willingness to be open to each other, gracious to each other, kind to each other, and curious about each other. So thanks very much. Please go outside, eat, be curious about each other, and talk.
You are amazing.